Story 12. Literally have this account to tell the story, because it's very specific. I was dating and living with an abusive asshole. One day, I had a tone with him and it got bad. He beat and strangled me, among other things. I ended up unconscious. He would have kept going until I was dead. My cat attacked him. My cat, who is a fraction of the size of him, and he was a big guy, went after him. I came to with blood everywhere, mine and his. The door closed and him cursing in the bathroom. And my little tortoise purring, with her paws covered in his blood. We got out, and many years later she's as spoiled as can be and still very, very loved. Story 13. My grandfather, an alcoholic with a temper, once got really angry at me and started beating me really bad when I was like 5 or 6. From what I know, I could have died from the beating, and our cat attacked him as well and really made him bleed. Didn't survive though. It's great to read yours is still fine, and how much your cat helped you. Story 14. When I was 9, an older kid held me underwater at a public pool trying to drown me. I fought back best I could for what felt like forever. Ran out of air and started to black out, had the time to think. Yep, this is it. My lungs at that point felt like they were on fire, and as I went unconscious the last thing I remember is inhaling water. My older brother saw what was happening, and got the guy off me, and dragged me out of the pool. I came to coughing up water. All the adult/lifeguards chalked it up to kids playing, but the kid had told me days prior, in an incredibly matter-of-fact, bone-chilling way, that someday he was going to kill me. He was trying to make good on that. Story 15. I was also involuntarily held underwater when I was younger. I think I was a little older than you. At that point, I was really comfortable underwater. Still am, just haven't been in water in a while. I think I struggled for a bit, but what I do remember was I kinda just chilled under there for a bit. I think his grip loosened and I think I pushed myself off the wall of the pool to quickly escape. I think that kid was taken away and banned from the pool after that. I remember my mom was freaking out, rightfully so. And I remember thinking, Mom, I'm fine. Looking back on it, I'm lucky I didn't die. Story 16. I was also held involuntarily underwater. It was like 30 years ago. I haven't had the nightmare specifically about that incident for maybe 5 to 10 years, but definitely still have some where I can't surface. Anyway, I had a hard time with swimming lessons due to holes in my eardrums, undiagnosed ASD, and undiagnosed sensory processing disorder. I was terrified to go underwater. I'd still follow instructions. I'd just modify what we were doing so I didn't go underwater. So one day, I was walking along the side of the pool with the class, and the lead swimming instructor, who is a well-loved elementary teacher, shoved me in the water. Her assistant, a lifeguard, held me under. I froze for a second underwater, and once I realized what happened, I started trying to hit, kick, and claw my way back to the surface. I surfaced once to get air, and the head instructor angrily told the lifeguard to hold me back under. He complied. I'm not sure how I got away. I remember shaking, crying, getting berated for not being able to go underwater, for not letting him hold me down, and for defending myself. It was pretty fucked up. Story 17. This gave me a flashback to a scenario that I had completely forgotten. When I was in kindergarten, I was outside playing until our teacher called us in. I began to crawl out from under the playground equipment when a classmate grabbed me from behind and began choking me. I remember seeing people run by as my attempts to get their attention were futile, as the kid had legitimately cut my airflow. Additionally, the equipment I was under obscured the fact that there was an attempted murder taking place. I remember starting to fade when he let go and met up with the class like nothing happened. I never told anyone about it, and I guess the memory atrophied. What really scares me about it though is the fact that my classmate and I were only 5, so he most certainly had no way of knowing when to stop. Story 18. I was terrorized by a kid at the public pool. I got tackled and held underwater under my towel, and I couldn't breathe. I had the full cartoon life flash, and I tried to be okay dying. And then someone tackled him off me, and I surfaced, and puked pool water everywhere. Story 19. Sister tried to drown me in my cousin's pool. I was 10, and she was 13. The only reason she stopped is because my cousin grabbed her off of me and told our grandmother. She's done stuff like this before. One time she grabbed a knife and chased me when my grandparents weren't home. I ran into my room and locked the door, and she stayed there stabbing the door. Story 20. Feels pretty insignificant considering there are people here that have been shot, stabbed, etc., but here goes. My dad tried to choke me to death at 18, the culmination of years of violence directed at me. He'd hired a private investigator to follow my mom, who divorced him 2 years earlier. I told him the decent thing to do would be to leave her alone and move on. He went purple in the face and launched at me, throwing his hands around my throat. For a split second, I thought he was doing the old Homer Simpson throttling, nothing more. But I quickly realized he was forcing his thumbs down onto my windpipe with intent. I felt my eyes bulging in my sockets, so I brought my knee up to his stomach as hard as I could, broke free and left the house. Spent the next few months sleeping in underground car parks and ditches until a friend found out and took me in. He's never apologized. He's never so much as acknowledged it. Story 21. My brother and I were sound asleep and unbeknown to us, my mother decided to leave my father. She woke my brother and I at 3 in the morning in a panic. My father was a heroin addict and not prone to the best decisions. Whilst my mother was loading us into the car, my father went for his rifle. As we were driving away into the darkness, and we heard shots fired, my mother just kept driving as fast as she could. We didn't realize until the next morning that there was a bullet hole in rear bumper and in the driver's side rear side panel. Story 22. Not me, but there were 2 boys who I guess didn't get along in my home EC class in 8th grade. One was kind of an average lanky kid, the other was a huge 6-foot-something guy who was always getting in trouble at school. I have no idea what prompted this, but one day when we were all working on a sewing project making pillows, the big dude suddenly came up behind the lanky kid with a pair of rusty kitchen shears and tried to slit his throat. Fortunately, they weren't sharp at all, so although the kid bled a lot, he ended up being fine. The teacher had no idea what to do. She was middle-aged and shorter than most of us, so she just kept screaming at the guy until he tried to bolt from the school. Police caught him a bit down the street, and we didn't see him for a few years until one day he just showed up our junior year of high school in the middle of the year. The other kid's parents immediately pulled him from school, understandably, and it was only a couple months before the big dude eventually got expelled for having drugs at school.